Hello, YouTube divers. This is Water Dive 122, and I want to welcome you all to another episode of Magic Metal Mondays. Today, we are going to be tackling a band that I have wanted to do on this channel for a very long time, and that is Dream Theater. Yes, the American progressive metal pioneers, pioneers, titans, legends, whatever you want to call them. We're going to be tackling their discography today in a two-part video. So they have 15 records. So the first part of this video will tackle numbers 15 through number 8, and then the second part will tackle numbers 7 to 1. So let's go ahead and get this party started. Number 15, we're going to be talking about their debut album, When Dream and Day Unite, from 1989. I will say this, Dream Theater doesn't have any bad albums. Like, none of their albums are horrendously bad. But they do have some forgettable ones, and in my opinion, When Dream and Day Unite is one of the forgettable records. It's here because it is the most forgettable album Dream Theater has made, even though it does have some pretty cool songs on it. Fortune and Lies is a banger. Afterlife is a great song. Eats Jam is a fantastic instrumental. And Only a Matter of Time is a fantastic closing song. But the rest of the record is just very forgettable. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Charlie Dominici's vocals. He kind of sounds like a not nearly as good version of Kai Hansen from Helloween and Gamma Ray. Respect from Helloween and Gamma Ray. Yeah, this When Dream and Day Unite, while it is a great album and it does show flashes of what's to come from this band, it just kind of falls flat for me. So, number 15, When Dream and Day Unite. Number 14, we're going to be talking about their self-titled album from 2013. This album is kind of a wild one. This was the band trying to hit more radio-friendly success. I mean, especially with songs like Behind the Veil, The Looking Glass, Along for the Ride, Surrender to Reason. But, this album just kind of falls flat in that mission for me. It does have some really cool songs, like the two instrumental pieces on this album, The Enigma Machine and The False Awakening Suite. Both of those pieces are really good. The Enemy Inside was the big single off of this album, and I believe it was nominated for a Grammy. And I already mentioned The Looking Glass, Behind the Veil, as well as The Bigger Picture, Surrender to Reason, Along for the Ride. All those songs just scream radio-friendly, radio material, even though I don't think these songs were massive radio hits at all. And then you have a rather kind of out of place song on here, the grand 22-minute epic that is The Illumination Theory. I like The Illumination Theory. It's a fantastic song. But in my opinion, I just don't think that it fits on this record. Maybe if they saved it for another record, like Distance Over Time, for example, then maybe it would fit here and I would like the song a little bit more. But as it stands, it just doesn't really fit this record. It's very heavy. It's very all over the place. It's just a very Dream Theater-like song. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't really think that it fits on this record, if you know what I'm talking about. But as it stands, The Illumination Theory is fantastic. Absolutely a great song. All right, now, with that said, the self-titled album coming in here at number 14. And number 13 is The Astonishing from 2016. A lot of Dream Theater fans' worst album, rather. Yeah, this album is a wild one. An over 2 hour long concept album about a futuristic dystopian society. I wonder where I've heard that before. Oh yeah, 2112. This album is basically a carbon copy of the 2112 epic from Rush. And, I know Dream Theater, I know Rush was a huge, and I mean a huge influence for Dream Theater. Probably their biggest influence, if all things considered. But good God, man, they take this way too far. I mean, there are some great songs on here. The gift of music, Ravenskill, attempting offer, and a new beginning, as well as losing faith, hymn of a thousand voices, and the title track, astonishing. All those songs are really cool, but why does this album need to be over 2 hours long? I mean, conceptually speaking, I kind of get it. I mean, you're trying to tell this big story about this big dystopian society and, all the ruler, basically trying to retell the story of 2112, but in a more original type of theme, Dream Theater style. Um, but where 2112 just, is a 20-minute suite that is broken up into 7 parts, and you can actually follow along with the story. The astonishing just goes all over the place. And, it's very hard to follow along the main storyline of this album. And I think that's why a lot of Dream Theater fans aren't really a huge fan of this record. And I get it. It is just way overblown. It is way over the top. And it is just way too long of a record. Like, I don't think at all. I mean, if Rush can pull off a story like this in just a 20-minute song, there is absolutely no need for you to repeat the same story in an over 2 hour long album. There's just no reason for you to do so. But it does have some cool songs on here. Definitely check out the songs I mentioned earlier. But as a whole album, it's very easy to see why a lot of Dream Theater fans aren't very fond of this record. Just holy mackerel, what a wild record. So yeah, with that said, The Astonishing comes in here at number 16. Number 12, this one is going to be controversial. We're going to be talking about Awake from 1994. The band's third album and the last album to feature original keyboardist Kevin Moore before he left the band and before Derek Sherenian replaced him on the keyboards. This album is just, it just doesn't really feel like an album. It feels like a cluster of songs just put together. And especially when you try and compare this to Images and Words, the record that came before it. Yeah. But there are some really cool songs in here. 6 O'Clock is, of course, a staple. Erotomania is a fantastic instrumental piece. Voices, Lie, Space Divest, great songs on the second side. And, of course, and my favorite song on the album, Caught in a Web, one of their heaviest tracks. And this is, and speaking of that, Awake is one of their heaviest records. At this point, it was their heaviest record, and it was until Train of Thought came along, but we'll get to that later. But where Awake falls flat for me is particularly on the second side of the album. Like after Erotomania, the album just kind of blends into one another, and it just kind of feels like that this was primarily meant to be one full song as opposed to just a lot of these individual tracks. But yeah, it just doesn't really gel well with me. And some of the songs on the second side are just very, very forgettable. Like, I barely remember anything from Lifting Shadows Off a Dream or Scared, whatever it is. But yeah, this album, like as we currently speak, I am having just a hard time just trying to come up with the songs that can be found on the second side because it is just that forgettable. Outside of Voices, Lie, and Space Divest, Oh yeah, and the Mirror as well. Mirror is also a good song, but yeah, it's just whew. Awake, good album, but in my opinion, it just falls flat a little bit, especially coming off the heels of Images and Words. So yeah, that's why I put it at number 12, but it is still a pretty good album. So let's move on to number 11. Number 11, we're going to be talking about the 2019 album, Distance Over Time. Coming off of a wild bonanza that is The Astonishing, this just feels like a breath of fresh air. I mean, the heavy Dream Theater kind of starts here, like the more modern Dream Theater with like all these modern rules or progressive metal. Like they're infusing a little bit more gent here. Like I hear a lot of Meshuggah and Periphery influences on this record and from the following record, A View from the Top of the World, but we'll get to that later. Um, but Distance Over Time, just a huge step from the previous two records, the self-titled and the Astonishing. Um, I mean, At Wit's End and Pale Blue Dot, both of these long songs are just really, really cool, especially At Wit's End, which I think is one of the best songs from the Mike Mangini era of Dream Theater. Um, let's see. And then we also have Fall Into the Light, which is another great song. But my favorite song on the album has to go to Untethered Angel, the opening track. One of Dream Theater's best riffs ever. Just, oh my god. And then Paralyzed and S2N are also two really cool songs. Room 137 is also really good as well. There's a lot of cool and memorable songs on this record. But in my opinion, they've made better stuff. So from here on out, these are all the albums that are very memorable to me and are very, very great records. So let's continue on, shall we? Number 10, we got the 1997 album Falling Into Infinity. I hear a lot of Dream Theater fans complain about this album as it's their first attempt of going into a more radio-friendly direction. And yes, it much like the self-titled album, this is them going in a more mainstream direction. But unlike the self-titled album, which in my opinion was very, very forgettable, Falling Into Infinity is a very, very fun record. There are a lot of cool and underrated songs on here, like Peruvian Skies is a fantastic song. I know people don't really like Take Away My Pain, but I think it's a really beautiful song. Hell's Kitchen is an underrated instrumental of theirs. And Lines in the Sand is probably one of the most underrated epics. But my favorite song on this album has to go to the closing song, Trial of Tears. One of the best Dream Theater songs I have ever heard. I just absolutely love this song. Definitely the best track on the album, if you ask me. But overall, this album has a very specific atmosphere. It's a little bit more darker and a little bit more somber compared to the albums that preceded it. And even some of the albums that followed until we get to Train of Thought, but we'll talk about that later. But overall, Falling Into Infinity is just a really underrated record. And in my opinion, if you don't like this record, please give it another chance. Or at the very least, just listen to Peruvian Skies, Trial of Tears, or Lines in the Sand. Or heck, even if you want to, Hell's Kitchen, or Take Away My Pain, or even New Millennium. Forgot to mention that one. That was a good song. But overall, I love Falling Into Infinity. It's a great album. From here on out, these albums are all just absolutely great, and I love all these records. All right, moving on to number 9. We got A Dramatic Turn of Events from 2011. The first album to feature their new drummer, Mike Mangini. Mike Portnoy is out of the band at this point. He had a bit of a falling out with the band. and they held auditions, and Mike Mangini comes in on the drum kit. There's a huge difference between both drummers. Mike Portnoy, in my opinion, is a little bit more forgettable and more, no, not forgettable. He's a little bit more crafty and a little bit more experimental with his drumming, whereas Mike Mangini plays a more timekeeper role. And, in my opinion, that's absolutely where he shines. Mike Mangini is a great drummer, and he's a fantastic timekeeper. And if you're in a band like Dream Theater, you absolutely have to be a good timekeeper. It's just absolutely fantastic stuff. There are a lot of great songs on here. Bridges in the Sky, Outcry, Breaking All Illusions. Those three songs are just absolutely freaking bangers. Lost Not Forgotten is also another fan favorite. On the Backs of Angels is a fantastic album opener. And Far From Heaven and Beneath the Surface, in my opinion, are two very underrated ballads. Just those two songs are really beautiful, in my opinion. The only problem I have with this album is Build Me Up and Break Me Down. Their take on a new metal sound. And, I don't like new metal. It's just, I'm not a fan of the sound. I'm not a fan of that type of genre. And Dream Theater is absolutely no exception. Even they can't turn a new metal song into a good one. So yeah, I'm afraid it has to fall a little bit flat for me. If they had that song as like maybe a bonus track or a B-side, then this album would be much higher because the strong songs that are on this record are very, very, very strong. I love Dramatic Turn of Events, but if Build Me Up and Bring Me Down was not on this record, then it would rank higher. So there's that. And finally, the last album we're going to be talking about in this video might also give me some flack. We are going to be talking about the 2003 album, Train of Thought. I see a lot of Dream Theater fans rank this album way higher than number 8. But, and for good reason. There are some really cool songs on here. This is their heaviest album. There's a lot of banging riffs and just very dark songs on this album. As I Am has another one of my favorite Dream Theater riffs. In the Name of God is a really, really beautiful epic. This Dying Soul, Stream of Consciousness, and Honor Thy Father. All those songs are really good. There's really no bad song on this record. Really the reason why I just put Train of Thought here at number 8 as opposed to ranking it higher, I just like other albums better than this one. It's really that simple. But overall, Train of Thought, absolutely a fantastic record. And if you have this in your top 5, good for you. I just prefer other records. So that's why Train of Thought is here. So with that said, that concludes the first part of my Dream Theater album rankings. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is WaterDive 122 signing out, ready to dive and have more fun on YouTube. Thank you for watching.